This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, February the 14th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. He's produced the program. If you're in the St. John's Metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626, so you don't need me to tell you, but it's pretty nasty out there today. Most of the islanders are going to have some winter storm warnings in effect, travel advisories in effect. In the eastern region, it's pretty bad already. Apparently going to get a lot worse, so if you don't have to go out and about, probably should not do that. All right, and you know it's bad when Metrobus never even started their day today. The liquor stores are closed, so that's all you need to know about how stormy it's going to be in this part of the province. Okay, let's get her going. So, happy Valentine's Day to you, or as some people call it, Happy Valentine's Day. That's my favorite, that and Chicago. Okay, let's keep going. So, on Valentine's Day, you know, it's time to celebrate romance, love, and kissy-face fealty. You know, whether it be candy and cupids and dark chocolate and flowers, whatever the case may be, and hopefully you have an opportunity to have a Valentine close by that you can celebrate with. Now, Valentine's Day, of course, is pretty much a Hallmark card holiday or celebration. But nobody really knows the firm origins of Valentine's Day, which is kind of curious. You can maybe go all the way back to the Roman Empire, and what we celebrate today with romance and love was pretty much not the case when it was celebrated back in the Roman Empire days. It was sort of bloody and violent, so we won't get too deep into that. But they're talking about a bunch of Christian martyrs were named Valentine. So Valentine's Day was honored on February the 14th for Valentine of Rome and Valentine of Terni. So it goes on and on and on to talk about some of these ancient celebrations. I don't know what it transitioned into this day of celebration of love, but there you go. Happy Valentine's Day. And it's also Ash Wednesday. So I heard Brian Medore mention in the newscast that Dawson Mercer hit the score sheet last night with an assist in the Devils' victory. Nook got one as well. Connor McDavid, 6 assists last night. A 6-point night. All of a sudden, look out for him. Now, this is a story might not be of concern to many people, but it's an interesting one based on taxation and just how pricey it is to live in this country. So this is once again about sports and the Toronto Maple Leaf captain, John Tavares. So CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, is chasing Tavares for $8 million in taxes, including $1.2 million in interest related to his $15.3 million signing bonus he received upon joining the Leafs after he left the New York Islanders. So here's what's interesting about it. You know, for sports fans in this country, specifically in the NHL, I guess in Major League Baseball as well, and I suppose in the world of NBA basketball with the Raptors, it's going to be more difficult than ever before to attract high-priced talent to play in Canadian cities, unless there's a treaty that's been in place for quite a long time. It's a tax treaty between Canada and the United States, which stipulates that an inducement to sign an agreement related to the performance of the services of an athlete is different from income from employment and should not be taxed at more than 15%. But CRA considers the signing bonus salaried income and is ordering a tax rate of more than 38%, thus the $8 million scrap that's on the go. And if you look through the course of the last decade about where free agents choose to go, many of them want to go to places where there's little to no tax. There are certain jurisdictions in the United States where the people don't pay tax. So no state income tax if you want to play for Dallas or Nashville, Tampa Bay or Florida Panthers. So Tavares being chased around for $8 million. Anyway, interesting sports song. Okay, so a couple of randoms there. It was on this date in 2004 that 3 former PayPal employees launched a video sharing website. Of course, YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world behind only Google. Get a load of some of these numbers. 51% of internet access users in the world use YouTube. 2.7 billion monthly active users so far this year, 2024. There's a quarter of the world's population uses YouTube every month. Revenues, pretty outstanding, about $300 billion last year. Amazing stuff. Anyway, let's keep going. Or $3 billion last. No, $30 billion last year, pardon me. All right, also, In 1978, they began to launch GPS satellites. And on this date in 1989, there was a bunch of them launched, make 24 operating. And of course, for people who are maybe out in the woods or unfamiliar territory, or most notably when you travel, GPS has been extremely helpful. So as of August 15th of last year, there had been 83 GPS satellites had been built. 31 are currently launched and operational. 41 have been retired. And they actually lost 2 upon launch. On that front, maybe I should backtrack to YouTube for 1 second. Did I hear correctly? Someone sent me an email that based on Minister Crocker's conversations with Verbo and the Premier's comments, has Verbo actually taken that ad down? That's what I was told. I'm trying to get confirmation, but I only found it out a few minutes prior to 9 o'clock. So all the hullabaloo about Verbo, and it's not for me to tell you what you should be offended by, but I'm not so sure the people outside of this province are an understanding of the relationship between this province and Eyes the Buy would have even known what to make of that ad. But anyway, apparently it's been taken down, which is amazing stuff. And in the world of travel and GPS and what have you, there's still plenty of conversation to be had about the Arrive Can app, whether or not it was necessary, the fact there's no paper trail. The Auditor General, Karen Hogan, can't even come up with a final price tag, estimating, based on the information at hand, that it's maybe some $59.5 million for an app that really nobody ever uses anymore. Once it was made optional, it just went by the wayside. Now, of course, there will be lots of politics played with this. It is important to get to the bottom of it because there's lots of really shady interactions from the consideration of creating this app for international travel and then some of the glitches in the system upon return, being told that you have to isolate when in fact you did not, and on it goes. The relationship between GC strategies and some of the people involved with public procurement at the federal government level. And then, of course, when we bring the full bore politics to play, Mr. Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, is asking for the RCMP to get involved. I think there's already ongoing investigations internally, whether it be at the Canada Border Services Agency, which is important. Maybe, the RCMP, do they need to be told to do their job? I don't know. I'll leave it up to you. But I don't think that story is over. In fact, it's far from over. Anyway, let's keep going. Had a couple of calls yesterday regarding healthy lifestyle facilities, pieces of recreational infrastructure. Mr. Davis, Tom Davis, who's running in the Ward 4 by-election here in the city of St. John's, talked about the Muse Centre. A caller later in the programme disappointed that was an issue that was put in the crosshairs for how government spends money. We were told last week by the host committee for the 2025 Canada Summer Games that all the facilities were on track to be completed in time. And now we're told, and you can only hope that whatever delays are working at the Aqua Arena, but the opening or the reopening to the general public is going to be pushed back by a full year. We thought we'd get back in the facilities sometime early this fall. Now, apparently, it's going to be much later, maybe a year later. But what's interesting about that year later, even though we were told everything was on track, is that the games are actually in August. So a year from September means it won't be open. What? So are they actually going to be able to get that facility open? Will the athletes be able to train on the only Olympic-sized pool in the province? So apparently there's a delay there. And the obvious conditions, there are obvious issues. Labor availability, supply chain, challenges, and all the rest. And of course, that facility built back for the 1977 games, but not going to be opened on schedule for the public anyway, that is. All right. So days like today, I think many people who are maybe always focused on concerns regarding homelessness or people living in precarious homelessness possibilities, and then the whole tent business. So we were told a long time ago there would be no one living there, and there's a lot to this conversation. I don't pretend that this is a uncomplicated matter, but when you hear from the federal housing advocate Marie-Josée Houle talk about there's a right for people, if they choose, to live in a tent encampment. And it's important to note that these encampments are right across the country. There have been instances where police have gone in and forcibly removed people. That has not been the case in the recent past year. It looks like there's less and less police involvement. Apparently there is a surveillance system been put in place. But when she released her report called Upholding Dignity and Human Rights, 6 calls to action to address the ongoing homeless encampments across the country. Whether it be the provision of the basic necessities like clean water, food, and healthcare, and maybe some additional what people call wraparound services. It's estimated 20 to 25% of homeless people across the country are living in these tent encampments. And not just in capital cities and big urban areas. Many parts of rural Canada are seeing the same thing. So when we know that there's been a variety of crises that governments provincially, municipally and federally have had to try to juggle, it's a wonder how we don't consider the food insecurity issue and the homelessness issue as an actual emergency or crisis. It's one thing to put forward pots of money. It's quite another to attend to it as best possible in the short term. So that means we welcome your conversations about the Comfort Inn and whether or not we're on the right track with that 140-room transition home. Yes, it'd be better than an emergency shelter and a congregate living. You can get your own room with a lock on the door and your own key. There's still many, many questions to be answered here. I mean, it's scheduled to open to accept guests or residents next month. We still don't know anything about the criteria for vetting and who's eligible. We know very little about the human resources on staff. And when I mean social workers, mental health counselors, and or addiction treatment professionals. So we really don't know what's going on there necessarily quite yet. Folks in the area, understandably, are not that thrilled with the location of it. There will be concerns with so many of the supports that are out there in the community are generally speaking in the downtown area. Will some of these services be forced to widen their reach because there will be a significant number of people living at the Comfort Inn, and maybe living is a poor choice of words, because it's really intended to be a transition home. So how are we pragmatically going to approach that concept versus simply have it as a turnstile, a rotating door, where it becomes just a replacement for an emergency shelter, just in better settings with a lock on the door. So there's really a lot to that. And in the world of getting into your own home, the Canadian Home Builders Association, back in the news, rightfully so, talked about the barriers to home ownership. Apparently there's been a 2.5% decrease in home ownership since 2011. So the obvious, right? It's interest rates. Many people in the natural churn going from rental, and there's nothing wrong with renting. Some people choose to rent for their entire life, so be it. But with the high interest rates, some of the natural churn to move from a rental into potentially owning your own home, maybe that's been stalled or compromised because of the high interest rates and consequently the high mortgage payments. But then there's all kinds of issues regarding amortization as well. The Home Builders Association asking for amortization rates to 30 years for new buyers and new builds, and the stress test. It is extremely onerous to pass the mortgage stress test these days. Yes, when we see interest rates fluctuate, people have to ensure that they're going to be able to keep up with a potential hike in their mortgage. But the number of homeowners who have missed payments 3 months in a row are at historic lows. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you look at the math of how much mortgages have increased. But there's tons of barriers to getting into your own home, and those need to be dealt with in some form or fashion. Did I see Dave walk away? Are you still out there, Dave? Anyway, so we're not going to the break yet because there's no one there to push the button. Okay, and speaking of that, and the whole concept of aging in place, you know, it's fine for me and the seniors advocate and others to be talking about what that means in preparations for the future so that more Canadians, if they so choose, and are up to being able to care for themselves, maybe with some additional support regarding home care, to stay in your own home where you're comfortable, is familiar surroundings and all the rest, close by family and friends, quite likely. But what we really need is for healthcare professionals to help us understand whether or not they understand the issues regarding social isolation and loneliness. Now, someone's going to tell me inevitably that you're bringing that up a lot. Well, I think we should. Here's some of the definitions, because they're not the same thing. Social isolation is the lack of relationships with others and little to no social support or contact, associated with risk even if people don't feel lonely. Loneliness, on the other hand, is feeling alone and disconnected from others. It's feeling like you do not have meaningful or close relationships or a sense of belonging. Reflects the difference between a person's actual and desired level of connection. That means that even a person with lots of friends can feel lonely. And the issue there is the link between social isolation, loneliness, and your overall health. It's extremely real. Everywhere I go, every report I look at talks about virtually the exact same thing. The direct link between loneliness and heart disease and stroke, type 2 diabetes, depression, anxiety, addiction, suicidality and health self-harm, dementia, earlier death. Unless we can wrap our minds around that and understand what it means to address it with structural changes, then nothing's going to change for the better. In fact, things are going to change for the worse. Just look at the age of the demographic age here in this province and the potential for people to be prone to loneliness and what that means for their health. So that's a societal issue. But of course, and I hate to do it, it also comes with a significant implication of dollars and cents. So anyway, I'm really glad Susan Walsh is on that. Maybe she can revisit the program here and further elaborate on what her and her team are finding out via the research and the conversation nationwide. Okay. How are we doing out there, David? I'll maybe get to the calls here pretty quick. Very quickly, though. So for folks who are yearning for a federal general election, it might not be that far off. It looks like the Liberal and the NDP supply and confidence agreement is teetering. It was always going to come down as to whether or not the federal Liberal government was going to table universal pharmacare legislation. The ongoing negotiations between the two parties all boils down to who's going to pay, whether or not there'll be a single payer system like the NDP want, and or it's going to be a staggered or laddered implication here for introducing universal pharmacare. And of course, we're the only country in the world with universal health care without universal pharmacare or coverage for prescription drugs. We still don't even know how it's going to work with provincial plans, but if that's something that you've been watching, it looks like that's heating up, because apparently the deadline for the Liberals to come forward is the 1st of March, so a couple of weeks away before that. Okay, we're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Beginning the conversation this morning is Harris. He wants to talk about the number of flights that we saw and the number of private jets that were leaving Las Vegas after the Super Bowl. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let us begin this morning on the top of the board, line number 1. And good morning, Harris. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Patty. I know it's a terrible weather day.
It is.
But I just wanted to change the conversation for a moment.
Sure.
I was reading earlier this morning with interest and disgust about the number of private jets that arrived in Las Vegas over the weekend for the Super Bowl. 882 private jets. Now, it's clear that there's a top and a bottom to environmental concerns in the world and carbon pricing. I mean, we're getting hit over the head all the time. And I just wanted to bring that to people's attention, that the superstars and whatever are able to travel freely around the world without any concern about the amount of carbon they use, because I understand that private jet travel is probably one of the biggest users of carbon. And
well, when we're talking about just how many people are able to fit in that aircraft as compared to like a 200-seater commercial airliner, yes, on an individual footprint issue, it is absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
But that's my thing this morning, just to bring that to people's attention, that the next time they're, watching some superstar, realize how much disregard they have for the environment.
Well, there's absolutely a serious issue regarding hypocrisy, right? I mean, do as I say and not as I do kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And many of those folks who own private jets will indeed be speaking to issues regarding emissions and carbon, the climate change related issues. And, I choose to listen to people who actually have some scientific background versus someone who simply is a celebrity or a well-known person.
Yes.
And the story I read, Harris, in the Business Insider magazine, is that there was over 1,000 private jets that had landed during Super Bowl week at the airstrip in Las Vegas. And, curiously, so I had another little look around because this caught my attention as well, to be honest. So there's 14,600 business aircraft, which are private jets, registered in the United States alone.
Yes, that's right.
Which is a huge number. And you're right. Whether they be congregating in Davos, Switzerland to lecture us about carbon emissions and individual footprints and what have you, yet all the while, you see the pictures of the airstrip that is littered with private jets lined up wing to wing. Fair enough. And the most active private jet in the world last year, Taylor Swift.
Yes. Yeah.
It took off or landed over about 1,000 times.
I think her involvement in the Super Bowl or her periphery to the Super Bowl this year kind of shone a bigger light on it, because last year, I also understand, this was the second largest private jet appearance. Last year, there were 991. So I guess her presence shone a brighter light on it.
Yeah, I choose not to care about that kind of stuff, to be honest. I don't have the brain space to be worried about who's at the game or who's not at the game. But that whole concept of her presence, as you put it, and the way that's been supercharged politically speaking is almost too ridiculous to talk about. But yeah, she was there, no doubt about it. And I don't know how many times she was captured on TV. You could actually bet, what they call a prop bet, a proposition bet, as to how many times she'd be seen on camera. I don't know what the over-under was, and I don't know.
I was watching the game, and I just did a little tally on the desk in front of me while I was watching the game. game, and she was on camera 10 times. And I since learned that her total presence, they were all put side by side, was 54 seconds. So obviously, maybe she's starting to wear out her welcome as well, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know. I just find it fascinating that there's so many people that was the biggest storyline going into the Super Bowl versus the fact that the Chiefs could win 3 in 5 years, or a rematch of a Super Bowl past, the presence of the Mahomes of the world. But no, people focused on a pop singer. And she's massive. She's one of the most popular people in the world. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I kind of like her, to be honest.
You know, Patty, I don't. If someone came to my door today and said, "I'll give you $10,000 to name a Taylor Swift song," I'd have to tell them to put the money back in their pocket. I can't even name one song, you know.
So you've never bought any of her records?
No, I know. No.
Okay.
I'm still firmly stuck in country western music, so I'll stay there.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. So, who are your favorite country artists?
I go back to the old stuff: Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, guys like that. You know, a lot of the new country music I don't even get, but Merle, Willie, and those guys, they're the ones that interest me, and they're the ones I listen to the most.
Yeah, give me some Johnny Cash, some Chris Christopherson. Fair enough. I'm in.
Yes, yeah, and you were talking earlier about YouTube, and YouTube is a great source for a lot of these videos that you'll never see anywhere else but YouTube.
Absolutely, so, it's a brilliant platform.
YouTube is a great resource, you know. Yeah,
now there's some troublesome content on it, but by and large, it's really fun to have a surf around and see some of these videos, whether it be people's own YouTube channels. And there's people out there, that's all they do. They're YouTube personalities, or they have YouTube pages, or whatever the right reference is, and creating or generating significant revenue just by people clicking on their own page to see whatever it is, an AC/DC video or Johnny Cash at San Quentin or whatever it is. Harris, good to have you on the show. Appreciate the time.
No, I really appreciate it, but and hopefully people will think a little more about the environment, especially when the government puts another tax on carbon. You know.
Thanks for this. Stay in touch.
All the very best. Have a great day.
You too, Harris. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, and here comes a potentially cruel summer. And if you're worried about Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl, you can just shake it off. Right, let's go to line number 2. So good morning to the director and playwright behind Heart Play, coming up at the LSPU Hall. That's Marie Pike. Good morning, Marie. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty, and happy Valentine's Day to you.
Happy Valentine's Day to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have a production coming up at the LSPU Hall next week, Thursday, February 22nd, and it is an hour-long comedy.
So tell us about it. You know, inside this envelope, you know, someone was telling me that this is actually Love Month. Fair ball.
Yes.
So tell us, you know, the synopsis without spoiling what's going to take place and what people will see at the Heart Play. Give us the overview.
Yeah, the Heart Play. Okay, so it's a story about a woman living in a cardboard cutout two-dimensional world. She ends up losing her grandmother right off the top and quickly develops a black hole in her life. And day after day, she's unable to rid herself of this hole. Like, she talks to a doctor, talks to a friend, her boyfriend, and it just keeps growing until one night she experiences a dark night of the soul and is confronted by her raging, emo, almost like Robert Smith-inspired heart. And then, dying to live, her heart, of course, breaks out of her two-dimensional world and turns her life upside down, exposing all of the negative space, forcing her into wholeness. And it's actually it's a good laugh. It's a deep show. And overall, I'd say it'd be a fun night out for people who take it in.
So let's break down one of the quotes in the news release here. I became kind of obsessed with my Venus and Scorpio astrology placement.
Yeah.
Build on that for me.
Okay, so I'm really into astrology. May I ask your birthday, Patty?
1st of May.
All right, so you are a Taurus, which I'm sure you already know.
That I am.
Okay, me and myself, I'm a Sagittarius. So my Venus placement, which is like the planet of love, is in Scorpio. And that's having love in detriment. So a lot of times when people have that kind of a placement, it can signify that your love is a bit foreign to you, or you find yourself loving things that maybe you should, and people that you shouldn't. Everything is a little bit twisted. And so I got really obsessed with my Venus and Scorpio placement, and I thought, oh my gosh, why do I keep falling into these love ruts? What is happening? Why do I love so intensely? And then I basically went to see a Reiki practitioner about it, and thought that she put a creature on my chest, and from that I said, what would happen if my heart came out of my chest? What would it say? And basically, it was kind of a raging emo, Robert Smith inspired Nan. That is played by Wendy Smallwood.
Fantastic. So just a question as an aside. As a Taurus and a Sagittarius, are we compatible?
You know what? My mother is a Taurus, and she's like my favorite person in the entire world. So I would say yes, but probably most astrologers would say no, because you are earth and you are fixed, and I am fire, and I am mutable. But you know what? There's so many other planets in your chart, Patty, which we can get into at another time, because I love it. I'm here for it all day.
Well, just and very quickly, I can be fire. Make no mistake. Marie, I know there's also a prize pack for people who purchased tickets to the last 3 shows. Tell us about that eligibility and what's in the pack.
Absolutely. So, yeah, RCAT, they have an amazing prize pack for people who purchase tickets to the last 3 shows. So, to the Heart Play, which is happening in February, Between Breaths, which is happening in March, and Tamasha, which is happening in April. So, if you buy all tickets to those shows, the prize pack, you'll be eligible to win a $30 gift certificate from Gingerly Bakery, a case of Iceberg beer, a case of Crown and Anchor, a Crown and Anchor t-shirt from Kitty Vitty Brewery, an hour-long photo session from Steel Cut Media worth $200, 2 bottles of Mozzie cider, and a $50 gift card from Taslow, and a vinyl from Land of the Lakes, and it could be Frankie.
It sounds terrific. So it's coming up at the hall. What are the dates one more time so people can put it on their calendar?
Yeah. So tickets, you can purchase tickets at tickets.lspuhall.ca, and they must be purchased before February 25th at noon in order to be included for that prize pack. Now, the show opens Thursday, February 22nd, 8 p.m. with a catered reception to follow. Friday, we got Friday, February 23rd. There's going to be a talk back after the show and a Sanka set before the show. We also have Pick Your Prices tickets available for that Friday show. And then on Saturday, February 24th, that's the live stream. And there's also going to be a live audio description available. And then closing out on Sunday, February 25th at 2 p.m., we have a relaxed performance for anybody who's a little bit more sensory sensitive.
Sounds great, and it's simple to just go lspuhall.ca to get your tickets there. And if I won that photo shoot at Steel Cut, they'd find out just how malleable and fiery I can be.
That's right, especially during Heart Month.
Marie, great to have you on the show. Break a leg.
Oh, thank you so much, Patty. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Marie Pike, director and playwright of The Heart Play. Let's take a break. When we come back, Tony's in the queue. He wants to talk about the recreational food fishery petition. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Tony. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, just wanted to speak about the petition that Mr. Graham Wood put up on the recreation fishery.
Yep.
As you know, I guess I think you follow it pretty good. Back in the fall, the CFO reassessed the cod situation, and the lower reference point was moved, and therefore we're now in the cautious zone with the cod resource. And it seems to me like, we're in the cautious zone. We're still in the rebuilding plan. But it seems to me like there's a lot of people who think, well, it's time to open it up. And and get at it, right? But I don't think that's the case. But in regard to the petition that Mr. Wood has out, I think there's a bit much that what he's looking for. The recreation fishery now is 39 days. So if you round that up to 40 days, just to make the math simple, 5 fish a day, and you've got 200 fish. And DFO has acknowledged that the recreation fishery catch larger fish than the stewardship fishery. And here in this community, it's pretty active in the summer. You know, like last summer, there was 56 speedboats tied to the wharf here, taking part in the recreation fishery. And then there were still some who used to travel from further up the bay, bring their boat on a trailer and fish for the day and then go back home on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe stay 2 days. And if you're catching 200 fish, and you can use an average of, because they're catching large fish, so use an average of 10 pounds. That's 2,000 pounds of fish per person. And if you're getting a 30% yield on fillets, you've got 600 pounds of fillets. Now, I don't know anyone in this community or I think anywhere that would eat 600, any family that would eat 600 pounds of fillets in 12 months.
Yeah, no, let's just go back to the beginning, because I think that's an important part of the conversation here, is the modelling that has been changed for the Northern Cod Stock and 2J3KL. So they were using data from the last 70 years. So they started beginning back in 1983 to assess the strength of the stock. Now they're going back as far as 1954, I believe was the date. And so consequently, they've changed the label on the risk assessment. But I think the big problem here, Tony, is that I don't think we really know how many fish are taken out in the recreational food fishery. You know, we can have anecdotal evidence, and I see a certain frequency of, you know, like I mentioned freely, I've got a couple of buddies that go out a lot throughout the course of the 39 days when the weather permits. But I think, like, when the FFAW are saying that, you know, the FO needs to do a better job of monitoring the food fishery, I think that's not a bad idea. And it's not to clamp down on people who are willing and wanting to go. They have the time on the 39 days, if the weather's conducive, to go out and get what they're allowed to get, fair enough. But if we don't really know how many people are going out, and we don't really know how many fish they take, then we're having a debate based on just guesses. And guesses probably lead to poor policy decisions. So, you know, people don't like to hear this, but just for once and for all, to put some numbers in context, maybe if DFO did monitor a little closer, and we knew how many people participated in the fishery and how many fish they took, then we could have a debate based on concrete numbers. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Paddy. That's right, and you basically covered a fair bit of what I was going to say. But that's the problem. When the lower reference point changed, it didn't put any more fish in the water.
No, it didn't.
It just said we're moved from critical zone to cautious zone, and everyone understands what cautious means is you proceed with caution. You don't open it up and let it go crazy. And this recreation fishery, as you just said, people don't know how many, and I don't, or you don't know how many people is participating. We don't know how much fish is coming out of the water. And the comment, the reason why I called was Mr. Wood was on with you last week and made the comment that what comes out of what fish is caught in the recreation fishery is insignificant. Now that can be further from the truth, because here in this community, we, like I said, we have 56 boats that were moored to the water. That was residents and people from other communities who come and enjoy a day on the water. I'm not against people in going out and getting fish for the winter for their family and friends. I'm not against that. I participate. I take people out, and my friends and my family, and we enjoy the day, have a good laugh. We come in and we clean up the fish, and they take the fish and bring it home. I wait until September month when the when I'm into the stewardship fishery and get some fish for the winter for myself. But the thing that's happening is we got people here in the community that go out on 2 or 3 weekends and they got enough fish for themselves, for their family, and they enjoy the day, a nice calm day on the water, sunny day, and and then they take up the boat. But we've got a number of people who go fishing under the recreation fishery, 3 people in a boat, and they go out 6 o'clock in the morning. By lunchtime, they got 2 or 3 trips in. Fishery shows up. Fisheries conservation protection. They come down around the community and they check a few people that are going in and coming in, and they hang around for an hour or so, and then they leave. I mean, if they had the Mexican army or any of the Chinese army, they wouldn't keep the tabs on this, because every community in Newfoundland have people who like to go fishing, and when the weather is good, their boats are out and they're fishing. DFO can't cover all of the communities.
No.
They do spot checks, and in those spot checks, they've nabbed people who have been going out more than once, or who have been bringing in more fish than they're allowed. So we do know what's happening. We just don't know to what magnitude.
Yeah, and add to that, there's some confusion about what you're allowed to catch as well. So, as we always say, so it's 5 fish per person, 15 per boat. But then DFO has said themselves in an email that if there's 5 of us in a vessel that can handle 5, and we come in with 5 fish each, no one's going to get in trouble, so to speak. So, which way is it? So DFO is a little bit unclear on this stuff. My suggestion, and people hate to hear it. I got a bunch of saucy emails overnight saying, I'm not using a logbook, I hate the tag idea, but I think, just real numbers and data to be compiled can make for a better decision here. And secondly, if the worry is that there's so many days potentially throughout the 39 allowed where the weather's not good, and so people don't want to take a chance, or maybe unfortunately some will take a chance, my thought would be, if that's one of the big concerns, so let's say in the first 2 weekends of fishing, and there was 2 days where it was really unsafe to go out. Let's add 2 days to the end. Let's make sure that people had a legitimate 39 days to get on the water. At the very least, that would be fair. I don't know if expanding to 90 days is the right idea, and DFO does a pretty poor job monitoring because they can't be in every bay. They can't be up against every wharf. So I don't know, but I'd like to have some real numbers to consider. And I think you're on the right track, Tony.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think to expand it to 90 days is it's not economical for the fishery. If people, and I hear it and you hear it a lot, that it's their God-given right to fish, and they don't want to do logbooks, and they don't want to do this and don't want to do that. Well, why wouldn't they? If they care about the resource, and if they want the resource to continue for their children and grandchildren, why wouldn't they want to know how much fish is coming out of the water? The people who don't want to do a logbook and don't want to let anyone know how much fish they're catching, that is probably the people who are breaking the rules. And when it comes to the regulation that they put in place, I heard the lady, and I've talked to people from DFO, the regulation was put in for safety. 15 fish for a boat, therefore there'll be 3 people in a boat. The reason they did that was, I remember back a number of years ago, before they put that rule in, there was a boatman out of St. Philip's, a 15-foot aluminum boat with a man and wife and 2 children. And they got rescued by the other boats that was in the area fishing. And the reason what happened was there was too many people in that boat, and thank God there was boats in the area, and took them out of the water when the boat swamped. So if not, there would have been a tragedy. And people, like you said, are making bad decisions and going out in bad weather. What happens here is, if Saturday is a bad day and on Sunday is a good day, there's a good chance that most people are going to go 2 trips, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. I call them the legitimate people. But then we got other people who, and it's happening in other communities, because I got friends from Trepassey right to the Labrador, and the Labrador is not happening, but around Newfoundland, we've got people who are abusing this and have turned it into a commercial black market fishery, and that's DFO's fault. They're not monitoring it. The politicians don't want to touch it. Mr. Small down on the Bay Verde Peninsula, Mr. Small is promoting this expanding the recreation fishery. We don't have any science and a science update since 3 or 4 years. There will be one this spring, but all this caution is thrown to the wind. That's all gone. Don't worry about that. Let's go ahead and get more fish.
Yeah.
Get more fish out of the water.
There's been very little science done in the commercial harvest anyway in the last number of years, with the science vessels that have been out of commission waiting for parts, retrofits and all the rest. And, DFO, it's sort of one in your cake and eat it too. Because if we're talking about the precautionary approach, and that's when there's, caution because of scientific uncertainty, well, we have zero certainty in the recreational food fishery. Zero. None. Anecdotal evidence and no more, no less. Tony, I got to get to the break, but I appreciate the time and the call. And you mentioned all the speedboats tied up at your wharf in your community. What community is that?
Bay de Verde.
Bay de Verde. Okay. It's good to have you on the show.
Anyway, thanks for the opportunity, and have a good day.
The same to you. Stay in touch, Tony.
Take care.
Bye-bye. All right, let's get that break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Mr. Lush. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. How about you?
I'm doing okay. I just phoned to get your opinion on this Oak Island thing.
The show?
Yes, I phoned to get your opinion on what happened on Oak Island.
Well, I'm not really up to speed exactly what happens on that show. I used to watch it a little bit some while back, but every episode felt very similar to me, so I kind of lost touch with it. What happened?
Well, no, nothing serious happened. I just got my opinion on it. Is I think they should leave Oak Island alone.
Why is that?
Well, I think there could be something very religious buried there, and not to be disturbed, because they buried it so deep, and with so many booby traps and flood tunnels, they meant for it not to be touched.
That's true. I mean, I do know that the rumours are that there's a Captain Kidd's treasure buried there. And all the booby traps are really quite fascinating. With all the technology this day and age, the inability to find whatever might be there is really quite something else. So there are stories about, precious manuscripts, religious artifacts. Even some of the jewels belong to Marie Antoinette, I think, is part of the rumour as to what might be there. It's been a privately owned island for a long time. Treasure hunters have been at this for a very, very long time. And of course, Captain Kidd sailed the oceans, in the 1700s. So this rumour and story has been going on forever.
Yeah, but I'm sure Captain Kidd wasn't stupid enough to bury a treasure 120 feet in the ground.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying what the rumours are about.
Obviously, he wasn't coming back for it.
No, probably not when it's buried to that extent. And it's even changed names many times. Initially it was Smith's Island, then I think it went to Gloucester Isle, and it's changed hands. It's been privately owned. It's in Lunenburg County, right? That's where Oak Island is? Yeah,
I think it should be left alone, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time, Mr. Lush.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. When it comes to religious artifacts, there's probably a torn sentiment out there, because if something can be found and authenticated, and we understand where it came from, why it was where it was found, maybe to be on display somewhere or another, whether it be in St. Peter's or at the Vatican in the museum. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Vatican Museum, but that's just incredible what's in there. Anyway, so that's an interesting call. Oak Island. I don't know much about it. I kind of gave up on the show, but I know they've been searching for quite a long time. Let's go. Let's go to line number 3. Bill, you're on the air. Hi, Bill.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. You want to make a quick call today? I haven't had a chance, and correct me if this topic has already been brought up, but it has to do with the wind turbine hydrogen project in central Newfoundland. I know I've heard lots of debate on different things, but I wanted to bring this to the table. So about a year and a half to 2 years ago, the provincial government, right in the middle of the project in central Newfoundland, in the New Bay Road area, is an area called New Bay Pond. It's about 32 kilometers from Grand Falls. It's been a cabin development area for probably the last 20 years. They've had 3 phases opened up. And about a year and a half ago, the provincial government opened up a 4th phase and offered 60 cabin lots for sale, not for lease. Approximately an acre, a little bit larger, each cabin lot. 40 of them were waterside and 20 of them were not. And they came surveyed and had a septic survey done, and the cost was about $18,000 to $22,000 per cabin lot, depending on size and location. They had a public draw, and to get your name into the draw, you had to pay $25. And you could, put as many family members into the draw if you wanted. If you wanted to put 10 names in for the chance to get a family member to get drawn and be able to pick a lot, you could. So the 60 lots were sold. They had thousands of people put their money in, so they made tens and $20,000 on the application process. They then sold 60 building lots at approximately $18,000 to $20,000 each. You can do the math on that. We're in the millions. Mm-hmm. They never ever disclosed that there was a project being developed with windmills. So right now, I have one of these blocks, waterfront, looking across the lake. We were going to build a retirement cabin there. And at the latest meeting in Botwood, the map has come out, and that pond, which is a beautiful pond, and by the way, has 3 areas of developed zones where people have already put in, major cabin developments for their own personal use, is now going to be surrounded by over 400 windmills, and each windmill is going to have approximately a square acre of clear cut. And that's not taking into consideration the land development, the road development, the traffic, and so on and so forth, because it's a channel from New Bay Pond directly to Botwood to get to the port, so they're going to open up the road there. So my problem with all this is the government knew this. This has been an ongoing project for the last 3 or 4 years, and they unloaded land to unsuspecting taxpayers in a draw and made millions of dollars and never disclosed that there was a project in development for this particular area. They wanted to sell off the land before the project was announced.
A couple of questions for you.
If that's ever been brought up.
No, it hasn't been, and I'm glad you did, because the bid area for the Exploits Valley Renewable Energy Corporation is about 30,000 hectares. But of course, as you point out, rightfully so, it doesn't include all the additional development, whether it be clear cutting and the roads being established. When did the lottery close for the cabin country?
I would have to go back and look at my dates, but I mean, we've got involved in the lottery process and closed the purchase about a year and a half ago.
Okay, and so that would be in pretty close proximity to when Exploits Valley was considering Botwood as the hub for their green hydrogen ammonia play. So that's really interesting tangle here. And when you say surrounded, describe what you mean by surrounded. Like, would you be in the middle of the field of the wind turbines, or they'd be in close proximity to you, or what does surrounded actually mean?
In Kitty Vitty in St. John's, and there's a house on basically close to the water's edge, which there are. And if you were to look across from the pond where the penitentiary is now, in the penitentiary, you see 300 or 400 windmills. They have a buffer zone around the pond, so many meters away from the water's edge. But after that, it's free game. So and you can get a map online and see this. The pond is called New Bay Pond. It's a beautiful pond about 7 kilometers long, and that whole area is the pond itself, with the buffer to the water's edge excluded, is going to be surrounded on both sides, predominantly on the Botwood side, right up to the buffer zone, but also behind as well, with I forget the actual number, but I think it's 420, 430 plus windmills. And these windmills are all the large windmills that they're saying are going to be, the height or greater than the Confederation building, a couple of hundred meters. So it's unbelievable wrong in someone's. I mean, I have it from good authority that this was in the process. I found out after the fact. When the land was being sold. So, I mean, it's like the government knew there was going to be a development there, but they didn't disclose this. So we were purchasing land to build a retirement cabin, in an area close to Grand Falls, because it's one of the things you have to, it's my former hometown, and it's one of the things you have to take into consideration when you get to a certain age. You don't want to be out isolated somewhere, but the beauty of this one was we could have a cabin. We'd be 20, 30 kilometers from a major center and from a hospital and so on and so forth as you get up in age, so we didn't mind building a cabin there. Now, I've invested $20,000 in a block of land where I really don't want to develop it and have, my view off my cabin deck of 300 or 400 windmills staring at me and the noise that goes along with it. But it's also made the cabin land, it devalued it. So now I've invested money into a piece of land I can't sell. So, I urge you to go on their site and look up the development. And they've got the corridor, going east from New Bay Pond, surrounding New Bay Pond, and right down into Point Leamington and into Botwood. And none of this was disclosed by the provincial government. So, I do know that there were 60 cabin lots approximately up for sale. I think they did sell about 55 of them. There was a couple that were not waterfront people didn't want. And they had, thousands of applications at $25 a pop. So they made, $25,000, $35,000 there. We're talking over $1 million, maybe $2 million that the government has gotten from this land sale, and they didn't disclose facts about a development in the area.
Have you gone to government with this complaint and whether or not there's any redress available?
We're working on it, and I just wanted to bring it out there because I know there is a site that somebody put me on towards with regards to the wind turbine development, and it's disturbing in so many ways. I mean, the fact that they're going to put so many windmills in an area where there's already been, for the last 20 years, not only cabin developments, but there's a major international, outfitting company in that area that's going to be basically destroyed. Hunting and fishing lodge, 2 lodges. And, one of the other things that disturbs me is that if you look at the plans for Europe when they put these wind turbines in, they are doing as minimalistic an approach to putting them in as possible. Whereas in Newfoundland, the plan right now that I've seen, and I could be corrected, I could be wrong, and misinformation is always out there, but we're looking at a square acre of land to be clear-cut for each windmill. So you're looking at 400 windmills. You're looking at a destruction just cut of 400 square acres. And, I could be corrected on that. But my thought on that is, of course, compared to Europe, which is very minimalistic, which is like less than a half a square acre per windmill, I'm assuming that the clear cut of such a major piece of land is going to incorporate a larger number of initial jobs to be able for the government to say, well, we've employed X number of people, and we're doing that because we're clear cutting such a large piece of land, basically a make-work project. Instead of creating a half an acre of clear cut for each windmill, I'm going to create an acre. I can employ more people for longer, not realizing that the effect it has on an environmental area, and where it is. So very disturbed, very upset, and wanted to put it out there because not only are there 40 or 50 people that, got into this process in the last phase. And I do know, some people went ahead. Now, I haven't done it because it was a retirement project
But I know some people have already clear-cut their land. They've already, poured foundations. They've already built small cabins on the land that was sold a year and a half to 2 years ago. Plus, the first three phases of New Bay Pond has been there for, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even hazard to say, but 20 or 30 years. The government knew this was a recreational cabin area when they took it on. New Bay Pond is an extremely popular area. I grew up in Grand Falls. It's been like this for the last 70 years. It's been a beautiful area to go to. Okay. And so they know that people have an investment there already. Some $300,000 and $400,000 in summer homes, and right. It's disturbing.
I appreciate the call this morning and the topic, because I wasn't aware of this, but now that I am, I will check out that map and I will follow up, because if government was willing to sell the property without full disclosure, which is part and parcel of making a financial transaction regarding real estate, including just undeveloped land, let me see what I can find out. But I appreciate you putting this in my ear this morning.
I appreciate your time, and if you do a little bit of deep diving, or if you want it, I have the pictures from the presentation in Botwood. You can go on their website and get them, but if not, I can forward them to you, and you can actually see the development, how it rings the land and the pond, and exactly where it is. It's destroyed a beautiful area, but more so for me, I'm getting a vibe, and I hate to come out and accuse, but there's too many arrows pointing to the fact that it was a little bit underhanded. So
it certainly doesn't sound completely above board. Bill, I'm off to the news, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you for yours. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. And just for context, so if the wind turbines were proposed at about 200 meters or taller, the Confederation building is 64 meters. 200 meters is about 650 odd feet. Signal Hill is 167 meters from sea level. That's how tall it is. And these windmills are taller than that. Let's take a break for the news. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Charlie, you're on the air. Ow.
Paddy, I'd like to speak about there was one guy there on earlier about movie stars and carbon footprint and so on.
Yeah.
I know there's hypocrisy everywhere, but from my observations over the years, I think the 1%, especially business types, and I know some of the movie stars are in that category, I think they're the biggest problem as far as carbon footprint and despoiling our atmosphere and the planet. There's a lot of these people like Sean Penn and Sam Malone, that guy used to come on Cheers, and others that have done great work. I would put Taylor Swift, I guess, in that as well. And a lot of them do travel. They, as far as I know, if they're environmentally conscious at all, they buy carbon offsets, which means they're planting trees and that elsewhere and other positive things. So I think they're an easy target, and I would say that if he concentrated on the guy who called on types like Musk, who believes that the world should have more people, maybe to buy more of his cars, I don't know, and Conrad Black, who doesn't understand climate change, and Jeremy Diamond, the J.P. Morgan guy who says that Trump is right in so many things, and I can go on and on, Peter Thiel, and anyway, that's just an off-the-cuff comment. As I said, I think the others are too easy a target sometimes. Anyway.
Yeah, the carbon offset, I think, is a curious tool. Now, it does display some consciousness regarding your own emission or your own footprint, but it doesn't lead to a net reduction in emissions entering the atmosphere. It's simply you pay someone else to pollute less. So whether it be investment in a bog for carbon sequestration or for planting of trees or what have you, but it doesn't lead to a net reduction. So it's basically just because you have the wherewithal and the means that you'll pay someone else in some sort of project or individual to pollute less so that you can pollute more. So
I guess
it's a bit of feel good, but
that at least they're offsetting. It's not a total one-sided thing, as many people, like your previous caller, suggested. That's all I'm saying. I agree. It's not the best solution. Best solution is don't travel as much. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of greenwashing that goes on out there, and so whether it be Charlie Angus and his bill aimed at advertisements coming from fossil fuel companies, very much like back in the 90s regarding tobacco products and stuff. Not to say Mr. Angus is on the right track, because I think that's a bit over the top. But, I still have questions about carbon sequestration. I still have questions about carbon capture. Because if you just look back to some of the last environmental gatherings, the COP meetings, there was huge numbers of lobbyists, huge numbers of representatives coming from oil and gas companies, and their number one theme and message that meeting was carbon capture. If the oil companies like it as much as they seemingly do, then it really feels like just an opportunity to greenwash the industry and allow them to keep going with the so-called social license because they're going to capture the carbon. In one hand, it's absolutely admitting out loud that the product that they produce is a huge problem regarding carbon. So we're going to capture it, and we're going to bury it, or we're going to inject it into the basalt rock formations off the Pacific coast of Canada, or put it down in depleted oil wells or something. So it's kind of greenwashing the industry again. I think the same thing can be said for carbon offset, to be honest with you. I understand and I get your point, but there really is a big load of greenwashing on the go out there these days.
Yes, carbon capture, sequestration, it's being done on small levels around the world. That's an excuse to do nothing, and a technological solution that I noticed the Conservative guy is promoting across Canada. This is totally out to lunch, because these kinds of things capturing, at best they'll get 1 or 2%, and that won't change in the immediate future, like 10, 12 years at all. So I agree totally with you on carbon.
But now the amount they can capture really depends on the investment in the technology and whether it's captured at source and those types of things, and how far from the source will it be injected, whether it be into a depleted oil well or just right into the rock. Now, curiously, off the coast of the Pacific coast of Canada, injecting it into the basalt rock formations, in 25 years it turns into rock. So can it capture more than 1%? Apparently so. So we spoke with the lead engineer with the $6 million that the provincial government put forward to examine this over the course of, I think it's 2 or 3 years. It depends on how much you want to invest as to what percentage you can capture.
It's about as effective as the electric car solution that many people think is the be-all and end-all.
It's not.
I'm not saying it's not a step, but as far as looking at the overall problem, both those would be, in my mind, about the same. But anyway, the other one I want to get to, you hear people blaming government for poverty and homelessness, and they've been doing that since I've been following politics, since the 50s. I think what a lot of people don't recognize is that a lot of problems are intractable. There's really no what we call solution, that they're suddenly gone or will be gone over 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of problems we can only manage. And I would look on housing and poverty and mental illness and so on as at least 3 of these. Not saying we can't manage them better and do more. I think we can, but let's not go talking about final solutions for any of these things, right?
There's no such thing as a final solution. There's no silver bullet to deal with poverty. But government does play a role here. I mean, the inequity between the rich and the poor and that growing divide is absolutely massive. Then you talk about things that are maybe people don't give much attention to, but just look at some of the segments of society that find themselves living in poverty or the working poor, whether it be folks with accessibility needs and the inability to get a job, whether it be people who are aged and now the concept of ageism where they can't get back to the workforce because they've been deemed now so-called all of a sudden not hireable or useless or whatever word people want to attach to it. So there's all kinds of things regarding poverty and interaction with healthcare, poverty and interaction with the criminal justice system. So government does play an active role, but I agree with your summary point is that there's not one solution. There's not one solution to anything, if we're being honest. Every issue that governments tackle with or societal issues are complicated. And there's 100 moving parts to some of the more complex issues that we're trying to deal with. So again, this only my opinion. If you think that the politician you support or the political party you support has all the answers to any question, you're wrong. You're just 100% wrong. Because good ideas are across the political spectrum, and whoever tells you, I got the idea that's going to solve X, Y, or Z, they're feeding you a load of malarkey.
Yeah, that would be what Trump does, right?
Well, I think it's a pretty common political tool. Some people and parties are worse at it or more repeat offenders than others, but yeah,
he was going to solve the Middle East, and North Korea wouldn't have nuclear weapons, and you can go on and on. But anyway, the last point I want to make on Oak Island, on a lighter note, as I told you before, I visited Oak Island way back in the 60s. I've been following it, read several books, and following that series, although we don't get it now. I got to have somebody in St. John's tape it. But whoever buried that stuff down there, stuff was buried at the 90-100-foot level, tunnels basically going everywhere because the wood has been carbon dated going way, way back. Somebody buried something, though, that it was very valuable. They came up with a way that you couldn't get at it very easily with the flood tunnels and so on. So I hope that those guys get to the bottom of it. There were many groups involved in Oak Island. That's the strange part about it. I'm more interested in what happened there, the history of it. There was at least 6 groups that they've found evidence of. But anyway, I hope they keep it up, and I hope they find something.
Yeah, I mean, people are fascinated with the concept of a buried treasure, whether it be Spanish doubloons to a religious artifact or, the scroll. Like, who knows what's down there? Some people might think if it entails any religious artifacts, leave it alone for their own personal reasons. But I'd be curious if they ever found out what it entailed. Like, imagine if there's a treasure chest full of Marie Antoinette's jewels. That's just pretty interesting, right? Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Imagine if it was happening in some part of Newfoundland. I mean, we'd be all over it. There'd be everybody wanting to say, what the hell happened there 2 centuries or 3 centuries ago, Anyway,
Fair.
That's all I got to say this morning.
Appreciate the time, Charlie.
Okay, sir. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break. Don't go away. Welcome back. So, line number 2. Barry, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call. You hear me okay?
Yeah, pretty good. Go ahead.
Yeah, Patty, talk about the food fishery. I couldn't help but bite my tongue for a while, but now I had to let it go. Talk about the petition. Before I do, though, Patty, a little history about the food fishery. When it first started, there was under quite a lot of restraints. They had a tag system for a while, which I think 2 years, which didn't work. And then I believe in 2015, I think that's the correct date, Judy Foote, before she became Lieutenant Governor, made an announcement at on the wharf in Argentia, I believe, that the DFO was changing the date system of the food fishery. As everybody knows, it used to be 3 weeks in the summer and a week in the fall. When she came out, she announced that would stay the same, but also, though, every weekend in July and August would be open. And for the most part, Patty, most people like that idea. Now, however, then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but then a year or 2 years later, the DFO announced a cutback to the quota for commercial fishery. And, of course, then the food fishery took a hit to that as well, and in form of we lost those 3 weeks. Brings to today current now, talk about this new petition that's on the go. I take my hat off to Graham for putting it together, although and I'm not attacking Graham. The message that he's saying. The petition is stating that food fishery opens from, I believe, 1st of July, Patty, to 1st of October.
Yeah, that's the suggestion.
I think that's too ambitious. I don't think that DFO is ever going to open the food fishery open like that again. Another point on it, though, he says that limit the boat limit to 20 fish. Now, Patty, that's going against the grain of what I uncovered for the past couple of years about the boat limit, and that's 5 fish per person. So now, if you have a boat that can safely take 5 people instead of 25 fish, if that fish goes through as it is, it'd be only 20 fish. And as well, I think it's taking a step back. I think that a better solution, a better suggestion for that petition would have been to look for the 3 weeks back in the summer and then have the weekends in July and August, the 3 weeks in the summer and week in the fall. And that week in the fall, Patty, that's usually a write-off, and I think that, something needs to be done with that week in the fall as well.
I don't know where the sweet spot would be. I think the petition will be viewed as overshooting, over ambitious. If the big concern that I hear people share, and I think this is fair, is that, when it feels like there's so few days, because not everybody's available all 39 days either. So let's be realistic. There's a lot of things going on in people's busy lives. It's not always an opportunity to get out on the water to catch a few cod. So if the concept is bad weather, if the first weekend is deemed unsafe to go, then add a weekend at the end. Just make sure that the 39 days are actually 39 days of fishable, fair weather, so that we can address that concern by simply adding days when days have been deemed unsafe. And there's lots of ways to deem the weather unsafe for getting out for the recreational food fishery. Now, there's a difference between going out in your 14-foot aluminum boat versus going out in your 40-footer. So I don't know what the actual target would be, or the measure of the wind, or the height of the sea, but there's got to be a way to accommodate that bad weather concern.
Well, 2 points come to mind about that, Paddy. That is, on your second point there, it's the operator of the watercraft who is totally responsible for.
You're breaking up, Barry. I can't hear you anymore.
Okay, hang on, Paddy. Can you hear me now?
A little better, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so Paddy, it's up to the owner or operator of the boat to decide if it's safe to go out or not, and that responsibility should lay on that person and not on everybody. The season dates, I don't know. It just seems that it was rushed and it wasn't thought of that well. And again, that's no reflection on Graham or anything like that, but I'd say my opinion. The caller was talking, Paddy, about the DFO trying to keep track of how much fish is actually caught. Well, that's a good idea, and something that I've suggested in the past as well, is have dock monitors and this and that to get some kind of figure on how much fish is being caught during food fishery. It's been acknowledged by both DFO and private people that it's very, very little, and you indicate there this morning it's around 1%. But it would be good, and I agree, that there needs to be some kind of tracking of what's coming in, to be able to then look back in past years and see some kind of estimate or some kind of trend what's happening with the codfish in the summertime.
Yeah, I mean, I've been taking some pretty heavy swats about even suggesting there might be an opportunity here to get some actual info to add to the debate, because the 1% has been an anecdotal number that's been thrown around. Is it accurate? I have no earthly idea. I don't think anybody does. But unless we have actual data, then we're just going to go back and forth, and it's going to end up with some sort of poorly informed decision that is probably not going to result in good policy.
Paddy, I believe that you are right, sir. And the thing is too, though, Paddy, is that what's wrong with DFO? Why do we have to grovel and beg just to get them to do some monitoring? It's the same thing with the fishery guardians, which is another battle. But here we are, instead of looking for more fish, we're looking for more protection, more conservation measures, and DFO is just ignoring us. And same thing with this, they're saying that they need some kind of figure to put on the food fishery, but yet they don't want to do it. And Paddy, wouldn't it be better to have dockside monitors, not on every wharf, of course, but in geographical regions, rather than sending up that plane buzzing around? How expensive is that plane by DFO officials and everything else?
Yeah, and it's hard to count. It's hard to count how many cod are in the boat from the sky.
Say?
It's hard to count how many cod are in the boat from the sky. Logistically speaking. Yeah. Final thought to you, Barry, before I have to go.
Well, myself on another subject, Paddy, myself and Paul White are going to begin our lobby effort again. It took us right to the 11th hour during the summer fast for DFO to acknowledge that they should hire on the fishery guardians for an extra 4 weeks. We're asking for longer, but I'd like to see them put some kind of thing into effect now that would say that they're going to have the extra staff on, or the staff held on for extra time, instead of myself and Paul White battling and struggling at the 11th hour again to try to get DFO to do what they should be doing in the first place. My God, Paddy, how frustrating is it?
It is frustrating, and it's an annual frustration that just seemingly does not get addressed or attended to. Barry, I'm late for the break, but I appreciate your time, sir.
Hey, just one more thought.
Quick.
Why is it that we have to wait every year for the announcement of the food fishery right into the end of May or June? We've been battling the same thing for the recreational Atlantic salmon, and now the TFO has relinquished and put out the dates and Bagland's foot. They know what it's going to be well in advance. Why do they hold off and hide it from us, for left better term?
No earthly idea. And it's the same thing, I think, even when we talk about commercial dates and tax and IQs. You know, sometimes it just is a little bit late in the day to be fully prepared to execute or to prosecute the fishery. Barry, I do have to go this time, though, but you stay in touch.
I understand, Patty. Thank you for your time, and as always, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, sir. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, international students, don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Cornerbrook. He's the Minister of Immigration, Population Growth and Skills. That's Jerry Byrne. Minister Byrne, you're on the air.
Thanks so much, Pat. It's a beautiful day in here in Cornerbrook.
Lucky.
But in solidarity with all of my East Coast friends, I am just bought a load of storm chips and all the necessary gear to settle back, and I'm with you, brothers and sisters. I'm with you. I'm enjoying my storm chips, even though it's a beautiful day here in the winter's wonderland of Cornerbrook and West Coast.
I'm looking forward to getting in out of it today, to be honest. It looks pretty nasty out there now.
It does. Anyway, listen, I wanted to touch base with you. You and I both tried to have a conversation, a stronger conversation about international students and the process the federal government has now instituted as a result of some really, really serious concerns that Mark Miller, the federal minister responsible for permitting, for granting visas to international students who want to come to Canada to receive an education, to study. There's some advantages to Newfoundland and Labrador, but also I wanted to provide some assurances to everyone that it is not the intention of governments or of educational institutions to suddenly say, let's come on, let's just start rolling in with more and more and more international students. If we're not ready for them, what we really need to do is prepare, and that's really the basis of the conversation that I wanted to have with you.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks, the 35% reduction in the amount of student visas allowed is kind of scapegoating international students for the housing crisis. Last year, I think there was about 807,000 international students in the country. People will make the financial argument, the contribution, some $36 billion by international students nationwide. But I don't think it's 100% wrong to understand that housing is a nuanced concern. It's not just one factor. Like some people will lean on immigration, period, as being the only problem in housing. Well, we've got a systemic issue with housing. We've got a structural issue with housing. We've changed the way we think about housing. Now it's all about an economic benchmark about housing starts. It's the biggest piece of equity I'll ever had. GDP contribution in the housing world versus a place to live. So there's a lot more to it than simply saying, well, if you don't stop immigration, the housing crisis is only going to get worse. Housing starts last year in this country were about 233,515, something like that. The average number of people living in a house in Canada is about 2.45 people. So immigration was actually kept up with. If we're talking about 2.45 people living in 233,000 plus homes, that covers the immigration number. So we've just got to be a little bit more, stand back and consider all the angles versus saying, well, it's just one thing. Now, I think, there's not a problem with pumping the brakes a little bit to get ahead of the housing crunch a little bit more. And yes, that would be an immigration-related matter, but it's not just all immigration. But that's unfortunately how the political conversation sounds.
Yeah, well, it's you're not wrong at all. It's to do anything less than be responsible, to look at the circumstances that are here present in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our province, as Mark Miller did, the federal minister did across the country. Housing, there is no such thing as one single solitary housing market for which everybody competes towards. There are many, many, many housing markets, from low-income social housing to a different category, which is student housing, in particular international student housing, to high-income housing, to all. There are many, many markets related to housing, and not are all the same. And one one intervention or one change in circumstance in one area of our society does not affect the entire housing market. But what you really need to do is understand what is the housing market of economic immigrants, as an example, those who actually are coming with a job already secured, bringing multiple members of their family, already earning an income the day that they'll land here in Newfoundland and Labrador, already contributing to the tax base of our province, and so on and so forth. So it's really, really important to always recognize that there is not one single solitary housing market to which everybody competes. And with that said, Patty, let's examine what was the issue that the federal government, that Canada, decided to tackle on January 22nd when Mark Miller announced new rules when it comes to international students who apply and want to come to Canada. What were the rules? What were the circumstances that he applied on January 22nd? Because those are unique circumstances as well. What Mark Miller said, what the federal minister said, was that in Canada right now, we have some provinces that are really, really doing an awful, awful job of supporting international students and do an awful job of how they treat them once they arrive. And he specifically referred to puppy mills. That's how he described them. And he specifically said that British Columbia and Ontario are particularly egregious on this in this front, because some of the post-secondary institutions there in those two provinces in particular, not only are they set up in the equivalent of back alley or strip mall locations, charging students $40,000 plus in tuition a year to take online courses from a strip mall in some city in southern Ontario or mainland British Columbia, using his analogies, his descriptions, not mine. Those provinces, he said, we've got to do something about it. And he was very, very frank about it. And he also said there are other provinces that are doing an incredible job, that are really regulating their post-secondary institutions, not only their public universities and public colleges, but their private career colleges as well. And clearly, Newfoundland and Labrador, Patty, is in the category of the latter. We charge, Memorial University of Newfoundland charges international students the lowest tuitions in the country.
But it's not necessarily about the amount paid for tuition. It's the caliber of the education. So if we're talking puppy mill,
of the two, it's a balance between the two.
Sure, but let's how about this? And I'm loath to oversimplify issues because that's probably a bad idea. But let's have a list of accredited colleges and universities that will be allowed to bring in an international student. How about start there? If that's the problem, you would have a natural decrease in international student visas, as opposed to simply just picking a number out of thin air, 35%. Let's get a list, accredited colleges and universities, and they are the only schools that will be allowed to bring in a student internationally, and then we'll just see what that percentage looks like.
Well, and that's what the federal government actually does. They actually have what's known as designated learning institutions. And some of those designated learning institutions, how they control them, some of those designated learning institutions are allowed to grant a postgraduate once the student graduates from that institute, from that college or the campus or whatever. They can then get, after graduation, a post-graduation work permit. Newfoundland and Labrador's designated learning institutions are Memorial University of Newfoundland, the College of the North Atlantic, Academy Canada, Eastern College, Kean College, Eastern Academy. We've, our Gander Flight Academy. We have very few federally designated learning institutions. Why? Because we don't have back alley, strip mall learning institutions. In Ontario, there are 500 federally designated learning institutions. In British Columbia, there are 275 designated learning institutions. So I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. This is the purview of the federal government. But the bottom line here is that instead of being forced into a regulatory environment, Newfoundland and Labrador did the right thing for the right reasons.
Okay.
Our private institutions, are the best in the country.
Very quickly, I do have to go, but let's bounce back to housing for 1 second. With all the contributing factors to the housing crisis across the country, there's one that gets some attention and focus. It's timing and permitting and cost. So if it takes forever and a day to identify a piece of property, whether it be uncleared land or a home, to renovate, to tear down, to rebuild, whatever, it takes too long. And there's a bunch of duplicity in the system here. The CFIB has given this province an F across the board for red tape reduction. So in all fairness to the current government, I don't think there's been a whole lot done, whether it be at the municipal level to really attend to this and or the provincial level. So how do you speak to that CFIB F in red tape reduction?
Well, municipalities in our province, same as across the entire country, they decide their zoning. Their zoning decisions are made within the municipal government themselves. I don't think.
But there's also issues, red tape, and things even like Crown Lands. So there's provincial interaction with this F.
Oh, I do not disagree with that. Crown Lands is something that definitely needs to be tackled. When I was minister responsible for Crown Lands, we were able to take an 8,000 waiting list or application base that was sitting in the queue sometimes for months and bring that down to near zero. We do have more work to do on Crown Lands. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and you will be seeing actions being taken on Crown Lands. But the whole totality of this is that I think what has to happen, and this is, I'll go back to the international students, if Newfoundland and Labrador gets certainty, if the final decision of Ottawa about international students is with certainty that we can get this number in the future, well then with that certainty, with that guaranteed confidence, not only can Memorial and CNA, but other private builders could go out and say, listen, we know that there will be this number of international students that one day can and will likely come to Newfoundland and Labrador. There's a good business case to be made to start building student housing, to charge reasonable rates, market rates, but to build that housing to allow that to come. That's what Mark Miller did, is he promised every province of Canada and every territory that he would divide up the number of international students based on a per capita basis. Why did he do that? To make sure that international students go to the remarkable learning centers right across this entire country and spread that group of international students right across the entire country instead of just being centered in Southern Ontario and mainland BC. We want to make sure, now Minister Krista Howell, the Minister of Post-Secondary Education, she's in charge of this file. But my interest and her interest is to make sure that Mark Miller makes good on this so that we can grow our international student population here in our province responsibly, as we have done. We're the province that Mark Miller should be pointed to.
Fair enough.
What happens when it gets done right.
Fair enough.
I call on our federal MPs to make sure that Mark Miller's promise is completed in the interest of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Fair enough. But you were the minister responsible for Crown Lands. You also moved one of the Crown Lands divisions to your own riding. And I don't think there was ever really a well-understood rationale as to why.
Well, actually, the decision was taken before I was Minister of Crown Lands. But the rationale was a very simple one. Crown Lands has the most intimate interaction between Crown Lands is with forestry and agriculture, and the forestry department and the agriculture department were always headquartered in Corner Brook, and so there was a cabinet decision to say, to make sure that the efficiencies are created, the back and forth, the collision of staff, the positive collision of staff in making good decisions. There was a decision to move Crown Lands side by side with forestry and agriculture. I still think that makes a lot of sense.
I appreciate the time. Thank you, Minister.
All the best to you. God love.
Jerry Byrnes, Minister, Immigration, Population Growth and Skills. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Bill, you're on the air.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi, just take me off speaker. What's it like in here?
Stormy.
Yes, stormy out here. I don't think we got as much as I thought, though. Paddy, I'll touch base now and say I usually always only call for municipal matters, but I don't know if you remember last summer I called while I was doing a construction project in the city, and I was a little out of the element, and you asked to follow up when I got done. It was neighbours, and I was building a fence. Do you remember this?
Not particularly. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries at all. And I was a little wound up because inside the urban environment, I didn't know. But I'm usually the least intelligent person anywhere I go, but it does my homework. And after a long time, I replaced the section of the girlfriend's fence because it was done a wind damage, right? And I'll preamble with there's always three sides to every story. And this particular set of neighbours, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 boundaries around their fence, and they're only at war with 4 of them. But anyway, long story short, it was just, and I didn't even realize when I called you last year that the girlfriend, the section of the fence along that way, not only she had paid for all of the entire fence and all of the labor the whole decade plus she's on the house. So, and it all started last year with I just spoke over the fence to the neighbor. I was like, hey, I'm replacing this section of fence. Want to go half on the fence? No, not interested. I said, no big deal. And my background is engineering drawings, and I've only at least reviewed several tens of thousands of survey drawings. And anyway, through the jigs and the reels, I went through it. It was a whole process. And the time I called you was because I didn't know what to do, because it was becoming so volatile that it was like, what do you do? And so I went down to City Hall. I spent an hour in the permit office, got an education, made sure I was copacetic there. Went from fire department calls, city inspector calls, RNC calls, and
okay. And so where are we today? What's the update?
I'm getting there. And while I was doing this, I was making sure I was spot on, measuring everything with lines and whatnot. And I'd come around the bay for the weekend, and I'd come back, and there was damning, basically sabotage, to the point that actual legal survey pin went missing that was on the other side of the fence and whatnot. And I noticed that there had been changes done. And finally, they convinced the RNC to charge me with mischief for tapping maple trees that were on the other side of the fence that I contend, and it's a civil matter more than anything, but I'm pretty confident I'm right, for tapping maple trees on the other side of the fence. And I had to go through the whole process of being charged with mischief. I'm a law-abiding citizen, respect the rule of law, never ever had such a thing done to me in my life. And on Monday past, I went down to Atlantic Place, stood up, and argued on my own behalf. This is how simple and easy it was. Argued on my own behalf, and the Crown decided to withdraw, because I wouldn't settle for just dismissal or not guilty, because that's they withdrew the charges, and the judge said, "See you later." But I'm just advising people in these urban environments that Rennie Sims used to say best: a bad neighbour is worse than rat in the basement. And you don't recollect this call at all last year?
No, it's not ringing a bell. I apologize.
No worries at all. And I did it very poorly because I was wound up like a top, and I didn't know what to do. And when I got the disclosure from the Crown and whatnot, it was so funny, because I was smart enough to, when I was accosted by 3 people alone as an individual, the press, I won't say who, but somebody's phone number, because on the disclosure it says, what was it? Mr. Murphy said, "I'll beat you." And I certainly did not. I did suggest if you come over the fence line, I would defend myself without question. But the bottom line is inside, it's like I followed the rules meticulously, 100%, and had to go through this whole entire process. And when we spoke last year, and I get it 100%, it was like you couldn't make sense of what I was trying to say, because I was scared to death that something was going to happen. It was like this man and his wife and somebody else just constantly accosted me. And one day when I was replacing pumps and the thing. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I have to get to the news now in a second, so I'll give you the next 30 seconds to polish it up, Billy.
When inside the city, do your homework, and I like my freedom out around the day and whatnot, but it was just a mind-blowing experience for me. It was absolutely boggling. It was like how the resources they tied up, the expense with the fire department, the city inspectors, the RNC, et cetera, and then trying to make me look like some sort of villain. I was like, if I was, something would have totally happened differently. But I went through the whole process.
All right.
It's closed and over, and just do your homework, folks.
Always a fair suggestion. I appreciate the time, Billy. Enjoy the storm day.
I appreciate yours, Dave.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, the Executive Director of the Schizophrenia Society of Newfoundland and Labrador, Susan Hyde, to talk about the upcoming Family Recovery Journey Program, which begins on March the 5th. We'll find out more about that right after this. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show with Dr. Mike Wall. Listen live Thursday nights at 7 p.m. and Sundays at 4 p.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let us go to line number one. Say good morning to the Executive Director of the Schizophrenia Society of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's Susan Hyde. Good morning, Susan. You're on the air.
Thank you so much, Patty. Good morning to you and your staff and all the listeners. First thing I want to say is gratitude to the folks keeping our streets safe and responding to emergencies and anybody who needs to be traveling on them. Because the first thing I wanted to say before I go right into the family recovery journey that I'm going to talk about is that for those of you who don't know, schizophrenia affects 1 in 100 people globally. So that means on the province, if anybody knows what the current population is, we're talking over 5,000 people who are living with and have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And of course, that serious illness impacts families, coworkers, service providers, and things like that. So we're talking about an illness that actually is more prevalent than any of us really know. So as a result of that, what we do is we come on VOCM to ask your listeners to, if you know somebody that is living with, or if you know somebody that is a family member or friend, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, go over and say, hey, I heard about this program that's really effective for families and managing the impact of schizophrenia and psychosis. So we're asking that respectfully, so thank you for that. So what happens in the family recovery journey, it's 5 sessions. They're 2 hours long, and right now we're offering them on Zoom, which is really effective, obviously, to reach outside the metro area. And we talk about things like, well, first of all, we get all of our best family recovery journey guides to take our folks on this journey together. And they're really very talented people and very knowledgeable. So one of the things we have to talk about, of course, right up front is what is it? What is schizophrenia? What is psychosis? And how can the families and friends manage the impact of the illness? Because it has a different journey for everybody, but it can be very it can be very difficult to hang in there when things are very unclear, especially navigating the mental health system. We teach them, this is probably one of their favorite things that past participants have said, we teach them effective communication skills. So it's not about getting your loved one to admit that they have a serious mental illness that has all kinds of stigma. That accepting that they have it is not the point. The point is managing the symptoms. The point is having access to having access to good mental health care. So there's actually something, this is a vocabulary word for the day for everybody, anosognosia. is a very common condition that happens with people that are living with serious mental illness, where they actually do not. They are not aware that they have a mental illness. So all the things that are going on, whether it's hygiene that is, is being is hard to get them to do, or it's just like here we have to go to a psychiatrist or anything like that. It's really difficult to convince somebody to do that when they're not aware that they're sick. So that's important for families, especially, and friends who are frustrated and think that people are in denial, when in fact they're not in denial. It has nothing to do with denial, and they're not not listening to you for anything but the fact that they just don't. And it's a weird condition, and a lot of people don't know about it. So that's my word for today. It took me about a week to learn how to say it.
So just say the word again for me.
It's anosognosia.
Anosognosia. So what's the guidance for families who have a loved one who's unaware that they are mentally ill and need help?
You build a relationship built on emotions and build a relationship built on their goals. So if their goal is to get back to school, then you connect with that and you connect to the point where they can say, you know what, maybe I should go talk to somebody because I really want to go back to school. Not connecting because you have schizophrenia, because, I mean, you and I have talked about stigma before, and it's still very intense, although I like to say that we're getting a hold of it. So it's really about connecting with your family, not remember, not saying, you're sick, you have to go get help. Well, if they're literally not aware, it's really hard to get them to do that. So it's usually about, if somebody says, even if let's say they're having delusions, instead of saying, no, there's nothing on the wall that you're seeing, and no, you're not hearing voices, no. Well, it doesn't hurt to say, connect with the emotion and say, that must be really scary to see something on the wall, or really scary to hear voices, and you build the connection there. And if you tell them, yes, there's something on the wall, you're breaking your connection to them.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not the same for everybody. It can be, typically it's persistent. It can be quite severe. It can be disabling, whether it be because of delusions, hallucinations, or the changing sleep patterns, the unpredictable emotional reactions, and the like. So, schizophrenia, and we've had this conversation, is one of the mental illnesses that people seem to be afraid of. And they think that there's something dangerous about someone suffering with schizophrenia, when in fact, that kind of hampers the conversation that we're trying to have.
Yes. And I mean, we talk about that when we do the family recovery journey, too. We talk about stigma, because not only does stigma occur in the medical system, because there are people that are being turned away because that doctor, whatever, doesn't want to take on this person with serious illness that's so unpredictable at times. So the best thing we can do is just keep saying what the facts are. People living with schizophrenia are no more violent, and in fact are less violent than the general population. When people with schizophrenia could and have in the past have a violent moment, it's because they were trying to get help and they didn't get it. So we need to open up the door and say, okay, what's going on? I'm not afraid of your illness. Let's talk about it. So they're really not. And I think sometimes, and then of course, the people on the TV shows and all that kind of stuff come up with all kinds of things that aren't true. So that doesn't help very much.
Of course not. And before we get, how people can apply to be part of this program, and I want this question to come across as intended. So on the national scene, there's a conversation about medical assistance in dying. And then the government has pumped the brakes, and they're going to delay offer to people where their lone ailment is a mental illness because, quote unquote, the system's not ready. Now, there's lots of talk about inclusivity or exclusionary policies here, because there's not a category made for having lung disease versus kidney problems versus any other physical disability. But does your organization have a position on MAID regarding mental health or mental illness? Pardon me.
I think that the short answer is no, because we haven't raised it to an organizational point of view. But it sounds like, I guess what happens when I hear MAID, I hear that's the future. We always knew this was coming, so we need to have better discussions about it. So I'll call you back in a couple months, and I'll let you know what our position is. But my personal position is let's hold on as long as we can. But I've also known people who are very ill, and they're resistant to medications and treatments, and they're suffering really horribly. So I haven't made up my mind, but my heart is in it, So we'll get back to you on that one. Because
I can't really wrap my mind around it, because you hear testimony in front of the committee that was struck by 15 members of Parliament and senators. Psychiatrists saying it's virtually impossible to diagnose to the point where it's terminal. But we do have stories where this lady was in the news last week saying she cannot receive any of the treatments that are out there for her mental illness. It's not working. She is struggling physically, mentally, emotionally, and she thinks she's being left out and stigmatized because of her mental illness versus people with other physical illnesses that are able to, through a comprehensive process, to get medical assistance in dying. There's just so many troubling stories out there, like offering to Canadian veterans, and a couple of women in Manitoba, all they needed was additional home support, couldn't get it, and chose that path. And it's up to them to choose between them and their doctors, not up to me. But it's a really complicated issue, I think, when we talk about mental illness and access to. I'll give you some time now to tell people how they can get involved with the upcoming Journey program. And curiously, we actually have the medical director for medical assistance in dying for Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador, Dr. Aaron McKim, coming up right after the break. So we'll get some more information on that front. So give us the information about how to get involved.
I will do that. So it's just give us a call at 777-3335 or email us at ed@ssnl.org. And then the other quick thing too, Patty, was that we're collecting stories of people, family members, friends that have experience on this family recovery journey or just on their own. So I'll also have them call us or email us about it, because we're going to be collecting them on our website. So people respond to stories. And just one last thing for me is that, I have been very, very sick in my life, and I have been to the point where I didn't think there was ever any hope of me getting better. So that's why I'm a little cautious about answering it.
I understand. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but mental health organizations will be, having these types of conversations publicly or in-house. Thanks for the time, Susan. Good luck with this interesting program.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Susan Hyde is Executive Director of the Schizophrenia Society of the province. Let's take a break. And as I just mentioned, the Medical Director for Medical Assistance in Dying in Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador is Dr. Aaron McKim. He's next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to Dr. Aaron McKim, the Medical Director for Medical Assistance in Dying in Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador. Dr. McKim, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. How are you today?
I'm doing well, sir. I really appreciate you making time for the show.
Sure, no problem.
It's a tricky subject. I think when people think about it conceptually, for folks who have a terminal illness and living with unmanageable pain, that this would be an option for them. But I think there's also a basic misunderstanding about how the protocols actually work. So let's start there. How does the process begin? Because there's things like voluntary request, free from external pressure. So talk us through the process, how someone approaches this topic and how they arrive at a decision between them and their doctor.
Well, I guess there's many pathways that people can follow, but generally people would talk to their primary care physician or nurse practitioner about their options first, right? Now, there's a lot of people who still aren't aware that medical assistance in dying is actually legal, that it's an option out there. And there's a lot of misinformation about it as well. As you said, some people think you can have it any time for any reason at all, but there's actually a fair number of checks and balances and safety protocols built into the system. So the first thing somebody would probably want to do is educate themselves, find out what the options are, what the criteria are, and you can go online and find that out, or you can talk with a lot of healthcare professionals are aware of the criteria, but most of them are fairly straightforward. I mean, you have to be of legal age, so above the age of 18, you have to have capacity, you have to enter into it without being coerced. So there's a lot of stipulation that nobody should be pushed into having medical assistance in dying if it's not something that they want themselves. So there's a lot of emphasis on autonomy and on making your own decision. And as a MAID assessor, the goal is really not to promote MAID. It's to make sure somebody has a right to consider all their options. And whatever they choose to do at the end of the day, it's up to them, right? Now, there's two categories now. One that with a person who has a reasonably foreseeable natural death. When it first started out, when the legislation first changed in 2016, that was the only, eligibility were for people who had a reasonably foreseeable death. So, somebody with terminal cancer who's got metastatic cancer, who's tried all their options and are now kind of at the end of their rope, and they're really looking at more sort of palliative care, pain and symptom management. And sometimes they want to consider medical assistance in dying as one of the possible options, right? Now, a lot of the time when people apply, they get assessed and found eligible, they don't necessarily go ahead with having a MAID death. They just have it as an option, so that if things get so bad and so dire and their suffering becomes so great that they can't stand it anymore, they have another option. They have an out, if you will. But a lot of the time, they don't avail of that. In fact, the last couple of years in Newfoundland, most of the people who apply and are found eligible, more than 50% of them don't end up having a medically assisted death in the end. So it means that we've got lots of other good options as well. But I think it's important that people be aware of all their options. Now, a couple of years back, almost 3 years now, they modified the legislation. They amended it to also include people who don't have a reasonably foreseeable natural death. So these would be people who have other chronic medical conditions that would be drastically impeding their ability to lead their life the way they want to, who would be suffering. So things like chronic pain, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and other conditions that aren't going to end your life earlier than normal or than it would otherwise, but that cause your quality of life to be deteriorating to the point where you can't stand it, where you're suffering intolerably. And, in some of those, what we call track 2 patients, they have multiple medical conditions. They have, spinal stenosis, or maybe they've had paralysis. Maybe they have COPD. Maybe they have some mental health issues as well, depression or anxiety or something else. And so when we assess somebody in a track 2 situation, there's often a lot more things to consider. And so we usually have to track down each one of those issues that they say is contributing to the deterioration in their quality of life. So if they've got paralysis, well then, we'll get the neurosurgeon involved to see if there's any options there that they haven't considered. We'll involve a rehab specialist. If they have a mental health history, we'll involve their psychiatrist. And most of the time, people have mental health practitioners that are involved with their care. And so as long as the mental health practitioner can attest to the fact that this person has decision-making capacity in their opinion, that their mental illness isn't impeding their capacity to the point where they can no longer make decisions for themselves. So as long as they have capacity, and then the second piece of that is, have they considered all the available treatment options for their illness, And in the case of mental illness, have they tried, SSRI medication? Have they tried or considered electroconvulsive therapy or other therapies that are available? And if they've, been shown all of the options and considered and tried some of the ones that they wanted to try, and after many, many years of trying, their quality of life is in their esteem terrible, then they have a right to consider a medically assisted death, just like everybody else has a right to consider it.
When we talk about folks, reasonably foreseeable, at imminent risk of losing capacity to consent to MAID, things like dementia, early onset. And so it's not a mental illness, it's a condition of the brain. So how do we approach that ability to consent? Because people will have, like, for instance, sundowns throughout the day, where at some points of the day they're completely lucid, and at other points they're not. How do we assess that person's ability to consent?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And there are a number of tools out there available. And I find probably the safest approach is to shine light in all the dark corners. You involve all the people involved with this person's care. And, that can be their psychiatrist or their family doctor or their specialist. And it can even involve family members who are aware of their loved one. And so usually I try to make it a group decision. Like, we all weigh in. We all have conversations about this. So somebody with early stages of dementia, usually they still have their own decision-making capacity. If they can articulate the choice in front of them and the consequences of that choice, then really that means that they have the ability to make that choice. And so in early dementia, maybe they can't remember, what they did last week or even what they had for breakfast. But if they can articulate their choice, they can weigh in on whether they want other forms of medical therapy, if they want to consider other medication, or if they, want to consent for having a G-tube or other kinds of operations. And so you start early and you try to involve the person in their own decision-making process. And as long as you can establish that they have capacity, and remember, capacity is something that we generally assume that somebody has unless there's a compelling reason to question it. And when necessary, we do have a number of different types of capacity tools that we can bring into use to try to determine, can this person make their own decisions. But if you determine that they can make their own decisions early on, there is the ability to now make what they call a waiver of final consent. The way it used to be before the amendment a few years back is you had to be able to consent to MAID even right up until the point where they were giving the injection, right? So, right to the point where the injection is being given, the person has to be able to say, yes, I want you to go ahead with this. And in cases like, say, we had an advanced cancer patient who was getting higher and higher doses of pain medications to keep them comfortable, and they were starting to get to the point where they were so sleepy they couldn't really respond to you properly. And in other words, losing their capacity to make decisions. Well, at that point, they wouldn't be able to have MAID. And so sometimes what we'd have to do is lighten up the pain medication so that the person would be cognizant enough to be able to clearly state, yes, this is what I want, go ahead. And then we were able to go ahead with MAID. But now, because of those types of situations, you can sign what's called a waiver of final consent. So before you get to that point, when you are suspicious that it's possible they might lose capacity, the patient can sign a waiver. And there's a few stipulations in that. They have to pick a specific date. So they have to say, I want to have MAID on this date. And if I lose capacity before or on that date, you can still go ahead with MAID. You can go ahead with it on that date, or you can even go ahead with it before that date if I've lost capacity before that date, so that you can ensure that you're carrying out that patient's wishes, even if they're in a unconscious state because they're requiring so many pain medications. So that is an option, and we can employ that in the case of dementia, so that when somebody still has capacity, they can sign this waiver, and they can pick that date. Now, as long as they still have capacity, they can change that date. So if the date comes close and it's the day before and they still have their capacity, they can say, well, I want to sign another waiver for 3 months down the road, and we'll see how things are going then.
Yeah, and just for clarification for the listeners, and I just saw this out of the corner of my eye. Neither Dr. McKim or I are here promoting this. We're talking about something that's a part of the healthcare system, just for basic understanding of how it works and how families should understand the concept of medical assistance at time. We're not saying go rush to your doctor and look for this for eligibility. That's not what's happening here at all. A couple of quick ones, just based on numbers. Since it's been allowed in the country, how many applications for, if that's the right word, for MAID, and how many have been denied? Do we have those hard numbers?
I don't have those numbers right in front of me. I do know that, when we started out in, I think it was 2016 when the law changed, I think we had 6 cases that first year, and then it grew to, into the teens, into the 20s and 30s, and it's been growing by about 30% roughly per year since 2016. And I think last year we had, I think it was about 120 or so cases in eastern Newfoundland, and of those cases, probably less than half, I think slightly less than 50 of those cases actually had a medically assisted death. So it's been growing steadily since it began. In terms of the number of cases that were denied, I don't have those numbers offhand, and that's a little tricky because sometimes people, don't meet the criteria at all, and they're told right off the bat, and we never get the application. Or sometimes we get the application, we have the discussion, and it wasn't filled out, and they don't check all the boxes, and so that's a little bit of a tougher number to nail down.
Understood. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask if you have a personal opinion on the federal government's decision to pause accessibility to MAID if your lone ailment is a mental illness, and whether or not you want to help us understand what the so-called, quote-unquote, system is not ready or prepared for adding mental illness to this eligibility criteria.
Well, I think we've got to be careful on that one, because we're already assessing people who have mental illness and other medical conditions. Right? This is just for people who only have mental illness as the sole underlying medical condition that this is pausing things for. And in a way, it seems a little bit like you're kind of targeting one particular group and excluding them. Like if there was any other kind of a medical therapy that you said, hey, well, everybody can have this therapy, except people with mental illness, they're not allowed to consider this therapy. I mean, that would never fly. So I think we have to be a bit careful here in how we're framing this. And any group that says that some other group is not allowed to consider a particular option, I think needs to be very careful in that regard. In terms of not being ready, I mean, we've got challenges in our medical system all over the place, including in mental health assessment. But most of the time, people who have a long-standing history of mental illness have been involved with the system in some way. And a lot of them do have psychiatrists who've been involved and have been trying various therapies. And so I think in those particular cases, in general, I've found the psychiatrists very helpful and willing to shed light on how this person's therapy has been going and what things that they've tried and whether they think this person has capacity or not. So I think in a lot of cases, we are ready to do these types of assessments. Okay. But on the whole, there is some trepidation, because there may be a whole lot of people who ask, and we have to find ways of assessing them. So there's likely to be a bump when that opens up. But I don't think delaying it by 3 years is going to help people get ready. I mean, 3 years is such a long delay. I think it's more likely that people are going to say, well, this isn't a priority right now. We've got other crises bearing down on us that we're going to have to focus on. And this is 3 years later. So, 2 or 2.5 years down the road, then we'll start to look at it. So I think the 3-year mark was not that helpful in terms of keeping the pressure on to try to get this ready. But there are lots of places that have gotten a lot of things ready. Nova Scotia, Manitoba have gotten fairly extensive processes in place and are ready. And so, I've heard people make the point this, why should you say nobody is allowed to go forward with this because some of the people aren't ready? I mean, that doesn't really make sense to me.
Understood. Last one before I let you go, Dr. McKim. And I know this is probably not your bailiwick, and I don't know if you've encountered this, but for people who have a life insurance policy, generally speaking, for the first 2 years after you get the policy, you will not be covered if you end your life by suicide. But after that, there are some companies that will cover with a suicide-related clause. Have you encountered that conversation with people who wonder about the implications of their life insurance policy and medical assistance in dying?
Yeah, that was a big concern for a lot of people, especially when the legislation first changed in 2016. And we tracked that one down, and we got a lot of reassurance from the provincial government that they weren't going to abide if any of the insurance companies decided that they were going to renege on an insurance policy because somebody had a medically assisted death, that was not kosher. So I'm not aware of any cases where somebody has been denied coverage because they had a medically assisted death. It's not considered suicide. It's considered MAID, and as such, it doesn't really fall under that category at all.
I appreciate your time this morning, Dr. McKim. Thanks for doing this.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Dr. Harry McKim is the Medical Director for MAID Eastern NL. Let's take a break for the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3 to say good morning to the PC member for Stephenville Port. He's the leader of the official opposition. That's Tony Wakeham. Good morning, Tony. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Paddy. Before I start, I just want to offer my condolences to the family of Vince Glant, of course, and to the VOCM family on the sudden passing of Vince Glant. Anybody who listened to VOCM over the years were certainly familiar with his voice and his professionalism, and I always remember the expression, "I'm Vince Glant."
I thought he was terrific. The first time I met Vince, I was a little bit in awe, to be honest with you. Consummate newsman and the best newsreader I've ever heard. He befriended me. He was very kind to me, and that's a sad loss. Yeah, totally. And like I said, he'll be remembered. 100%. Yeah. I wanted to talk today briefly about last week. The last time I called in, I talked about the red tape reduction and how the province had received an F, the only province in Canada to receive an F. And now we've got an insolvency report that's been issued that, once again, shows Newfoundland and Labrador going in the wrong direction. Insolvencies filed by consumers, for example, went up by almost 17% last year
compare 1 year over the next, 22 over 23, business insolvencies went up by an alarming 141% from 2022 to 2023, from 12 to 29. So these are alarming statistics. And of course, behind these statistics are actual people, businesses, and people who felt that they have no other option but to seek insolvency. And that's a reflection, again, on our economy. It's a reflection on our government, because government has and is supposed to find ways to help people, not hurt people. And I believe that a lot of the red tape that is put in front of businesses, for example, is part of the challenge that business in our province face. The length of time from the time you might want to open a business, or the challenges you have with getting permitting, and all of the additional expenditure that comes about because of so-called red tape that's put in front of businesses. And these are real things that need to be changed. I mean, the cost of transportation as a result of increase, the carbon taxes, and all those things. And of course, when all of the cost of living increases, people have less disposable income, and they don't buy as much as they would before. They probably don't go to restaurants like they did in the past. They probably don't have that extra money to spend, and they're really challenged just to buy the essentials like groceries and put groceries on the table. And again, a lot of their disposable income is reduced. I mean, if you've got to pay higher interest rates on your mortgage and stuff, then you have less disposable income. So all of this is part of it. And I know, for example, I recently met with Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, and they told me that we are the only province in Canada that charges a sales tax on business insurance. And so that's, again, another way of holding back business and holding people back, and the extra cost of doing business in this province.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the trick here. Inside the big catch-all numbers of insolvency, certain sectors of the economy are much more vulnerable than others. Some are really quite secure, and their services are, in high demand, and they're always going to be fine. But for folks who, I don't know what the right reference here is, some of your disposable income or your luxury budget or things that you don't need to fend the wolf, keep the wolf away from the door, those are the sectors of the economy that are struggling mightily. And then there's also a pandemic implication on taking on additional debt load, and your business didn't bounce back as you hoped it would. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here to figure out as to how and why things like this are happening. So I think that report, I'm going to have to dig into it a little further because I have not read it yet, Tony, so I can't speak with any authority on it.
No, but again, it comes down to, Liberals, higher taxes and fees, all contribute to less money being available in the economy to be spent by consumers and to support businesses in our communities. And that's why I've called for, and will actually address when we lead and we form government, we'll review every single one of these fees and taxes, because we really, truly have to find ways to reduce the burden on people. And that comes with sitting down with those businesses, small businesses and others that are, and finding ways that we can put more income in people's pockets, and that's the goal here. The other thing I wanted to briefly mention was I attended the rally in Corner Brook on the redfish quota allocation. And I was surprised to hear that a lot of the people that spoke, including the Minister of Fisheries and the FFAW, talked about the fact that they had discussions with the Federal Minister of Fishery, and they were led to believe that this was going to be a good outcome, that things were going to be done right. And they expressed their surprise at the announcement by the Federal Ministry of Fisheries. And there was even comments made to the point of why or what changed her mind. And I can only think that the decision by the Federal Minister of Fisheries to change what the expectation was done because of pressure from other MPs, maybe in other provinces, or from the Prime Minister's office. So that is a deep concern, that when something, when people have the adjacency principle is not applied, when the historical dependency principle is not applied, these are real concerns. And this decision seems to be more about politics than it is about making sure they got it right. And again, now that the provincial minister has said he's going to turn around and write the Federal Minister of Fisheries to reconsider, I don't think that's the right approach. I think it's part of the approach, but the reality is here, if the Prime Minister's office has interfered and the Minister of Fisheries has changed her mind, and this is the result, that we are the ones that are being disadvantaged because of that, then our Premier needs to be in Ottawa, sitting down with his good friend Justin Trudeau and saying, this has to change. Because if we don't start to put that pressure on right at the top, it's not going to happen. If a Minister of Fisheries changed her mind already once, and we don't know why, I don't know that simply talking to that same federal Minister of Fisheries is going to change her mind again. We need to have the Premier of our province putting pressure on the Prime Minister of this country and saying, enough is enough, and this has to stop.
At 19% of whatever the TAC is, people are thinking 25,000 tonnes. You know, I've heard from harvesters who've done the math. It barely covers fuel. So when we're talking about replacing what was once a pretty valuable shrimp license, which of course is not the case any longer. But there's a couple of questions inside of this whole redfish allocation that I still don't understand. So if they're talking about historically the offshore fleet had about 74%, now it's down to 58%, what constitutes the offshore fleet? You can have a 100-foot boat out there that lands its product right there in the bay to be processed in a plant on shore versus a factory freezer trawler, which is a different kintle of fish. So that I still don't quite understand, and I've never seen anyone break that down for me. And even how they made the percentage allocations to different provinces and indigenous communities and stuff, they're just numbers. There's no rationale. There's no concept of whether or not people are going to have to build capacity to execute the percentage that they're given. So we're really just talking about high-level numbers. No real digging into what justifies 33% in Nova Scotia, why we're adding capacity to an already fleet that's ready to go, processing plants that are ready to go versus have to build to catch what you're not even prepared to go get. So a couple of those things really still confuse me.
Yeah, and you know, it's time. We've seen this in the past. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that another Liberal fisheries minister tried to take the surf clam quota out of Grand Bank and give it to one of his relatives over in Nova Scotia somewhere. This has got to stop. And for too long now, we haven't had any say in the management of our fisheries. I mean, whether it's the size of your boats, whether it's the type of gear you use, whether it's the quota you catch, we have no say in any of that. And I've kept saying, you know, if we can have an accord for our offshore oil, then surely we can have an accord for our fishery. It's not about us being the sole management of it. It's about having a seat at the table, a real seat that says when these decisions are made, we're there at the table and we're part of that decision-making process, because it's not good enough. When I saw those harvesters standing there and they talked about, and someone asked them to put up their hands, how many of them would lose their livelihood if this doesn't change, there was a significant number of those put up. And it's not just the harvesters, it's the plant workers, it's the crews, and it's the businesses and the people in rural Newfoundland and Labrador that depend on our fishery. It is a renewable mega project, and we have to consider it to be that. And this Premier needs to be in Ottawa. I know he's traveling in the country, but he needs to be in Ottawa. He needs to be in the face of the Prime Minister, and he needs to get it reversed.
Appreciate the time, Tony.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Tony Wakeham, the PC member of Stephenville Port-au-Port, leader of the official opposition. Final break of the morning. When we come back, Everett's there to talk about the recreational food fishery. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Last word this morning goes to line number 5. Everett, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. I could actually probably take a whole show, and so I've in the end is nothing. But your last caller, Tony Wakeham, he said something that struck with me, and he said, you know, we got to be there at the table. I'd like to remind him that at all of those meetings, we're there at the meetings, but we're on the table, not at it. Anyway, why I called was that I was listening earlier, and yourself and your callers dealing with the recreational fishery were commenting on the lack of data and the need to have exact data and all this kind of stuff. Well, that happens to be my bailiwick, and I've spent a lot of time looking at this, and I'm probably the one responsible for the insignificance comments and 1% and all this. Most of it is in the attachments to the email I sent you, which I doubt if you've had time to read.
I have it right in front of me. Yeah.
Do you? Okay, then. I actually that you don't have, because there's an extra addendum I sent on one of these consultation ones, but the real number has been measured, or sorry, the estimate, because nobody got a real number, but the estimate has been measured by DFO in 2 reports,
3 reports actually that have been published. Right, and that number is around the 2,000 ton, 2 kiloton, 2 to 3 kiloton. It can't grow. We can't do anything about it. Which should be made to grow because it's the most valuable part of the fishery most valuable part of the allocation on a per fish basis. It's the low hanging fruit. Tourism is suffering. There's all kinds of stuff. But anyway, those numbers are real. The references are there. You can check them out. One was a report by Brigadif Consulting, or 2 were Brigadif Consulting. They estimate, this was an estimate, but there was a paid for research document. They estimated that there were about 1 million codfish caught during the year. There's about 3 million trout caught in Newfoundland. There's about 1 million codfish. The other report was a bit of a side one. It was by Dr. Bratty. The MSC at the time, the certification was a big thing, and they were saying they needed this number for certification. Incidentally, Dr. Bratty was doing some tagged release studies, and he concluded that the catch by using their tags, that the food fishery that year took about half the allocation, half what the commercial allocation was, which was about 2.5 kilotons. We have solid numbers. Now, is that significant? I'll talk to you tomorrow on that.
Well, you're always welcome, and I appreciate the information that you sent along, and I did indeed read your email. I thought I might have responded too, but anyway, I do have it in front of me for consideration because the conversation is obviously getting a lot of traction.
Is it ever?
Well, because I think you made reference to the fact that it's low-hanging fruit, and someone mentioned Clifford Small, the Conservative member for Costa Bay, Coast of Islands. I can't remember now off the top of my head what it's called, but that is politically advantageous because people in the province, I think the majority would want more access to, whether they call it a God-given right or whatever the case may be. But
sorry, I know my time is short, so I don't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
It's not about the amount of fish. It's about freedom and being able to plan your day, and it's hurting the whole tourism industry when I've got to spend 5 or 6 weekends. I can't go to shows, I can't go to concerts and that, and it's expensive.
Yep.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, it's not completely unnecessary. Absolutely. In St. Pierre, Miquelon, there are no regulations. In Norway, it's one page, and tourists are encouraged, and there's no limits, no restrictions whatsoever. In Florida, there's millions and millions of recreational fishers, and they fish all year. They have more species, but they don't have the quantities that we have. It's just, It's ridiculous, silliness.
You've had the last word, and you're always welcome, Everett. Thanks for this.
Okay, thanks, Eddie.
All the best. Bye-bye. All right, that was the last word, but we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.